You're listening to Inside Public Procurement by Bonfire, a show celebrating the unique stories and heroic efforts of those on the front lines of public procurement. Each episode, we bring you the latest trends, tips, and real stories from procurement trailblazers like you, who work tirelessly to bring positive impact to the agencies and communities you serve. Together, let's elevate the field of public procurement to new heights. Now, pull up a chair and let's gather around the bonfire. Our show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to Inside Public Procurement Podcast. My name is Rachel Friesen and I am the Director of Client Experience at Bonfire, an e-procurement solution used by over 450 public agencies in North America. I'm joined today by Adam Stearns, Director of Purchasing at Magnolia ISD, which is made up of over 13,000 students across 16 campuses. Adam currently resides in Texas with his wife of nearly 7 years and his two boys. One is wildly energetic 2-year-old who keeps them on their toes, and the other is a brand new 7-week-old that keeps both him and his wife up at night. Thank you so much for joining me today, Adam.
Thank you, Rachel. Glad to be here.
Of course, and you look fresh and you sound crystal clear, regardless of like the questionable amount of sleep you may have gotten last night.
So. I appreciate that.
Oh my goodness! But again, at the end of the day, if not all of your sentences are fully formed, I think with that intro, everyone will give you grace. You're fine.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah. And then, Adam, actually, before we get started, I'm curious, what are you looking forward to as we head into winter?
Well, personally, we had just moved into a new home, so I'm looking forward to getting settled in there with our boys and kind of getting everything to where we like it. At work, this is kind of our first after COVID being able to settle into kind of a new idea of what our department is, and so I'm really looking forward to getting that all squared away and kind of getting an idea of what we're doing, who's on first, and what this year's going to look like.
No, exactly. We'll dive into that a bit today too, because I know I'll give everyone a bit of a teaser. Adam sort of designed his function from the ground up. So it's probably great for yourselves to hear that there's still evolutions that occur, even if you were there upon inception. Yeah. And then on that note, because I'm sure that piqued some people's interest, do you want to share how you ended up in procurement and purchasing? It's always an interesting path for everyone.
Definitely. I worked in private sector ever since I graduated from college. And then when my wife and I moved out here to Texas, I took a teaching position here in Magnolia. And, I was an accountant at the time for another organization and really started to see, I never fully enjoyed any of my private sector positions, just didn't feel as though I was fulfilled by any of them. And, saw that there was an opening here at Magnolia ISD for accounts payable and purchasing supervisor, and had the opportunity to either go the route of finance or the route of procurement, and kind of everything I could for both, and just really enjoyed the process of procurement, enjoyed the people I was working with throughout Texas, and just the people I was able to meet, and the whole process in general. And that's really how I got into procurement and got excited about it.
No, that's great. And you were, correct me if I'm wrong, were you the first procurement hire at Magnolia?
Yes. So they had, people before me that would kind of play the function of being able to, go out to bid or anything like that. But I was the first one that came in and was really taking on the role of, leading the purchasing department. Of course, at the time, it was just a department of one, and was able to build that process. So I didn't know anything about public procurement at the time. So I came into this and, I had to learn everything, and of course it was intimidating going to my first training, and they're literally holding up an orange jumpsuit saying, don't let this be you, you gotta make sure you're following all the laws. And so, that was intimidating, but I learned everything I could and was able to build all of our processes and ultimately go from being a team of one to a year, 4 years ever since I started, now to a team of 7. So, we're definitely growing, and that's, like you said, it's cool to see because, a lot of school districts have a set department already, and they have a set number of people, and, you don't see much growth within the procurement department. So It's cool to be able to be here where I can kind of build it to what I want it to be and what the district needs.
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll dive into advice you have for those who are in the shoes, or soon will be, that you were in the sense of like building that function from scratch. But to isolate something that you said there, you were coming from private sector into public. So you just had to even equip yourself on the legalities, the legislation, everything that surrounded you not going into that jumpsuit, as you alluded to. How did you equip yourself in that area?
Well, luckily, the state of Texas has a lot of great opportunities for us to learn through the Texas Association of School Business Officials. And so I go to all the trainings I possibly can, get to know, connect with peers across the state and learn from them. Of course, reading our board policy, definitely a lively read at night. And, understanding board policy, reading other districts, purchasing manuals, and then the process of putting together a purchasing manual for our district. I learned a lot in that process and just creating, what was going to be best for us. And so while following those laws. So yeah, that was kind of the best move, to read our board policy, read Texas Education Code, anything I could get my hands on to really understand and know the laws and the processes, and then kind of start the basics and build from there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you've already kind of alluded to some of your playbook from how you designed the function. But if you were looking back, what advice would you have for those that are building out? You could be specific to ISDs, it's up to you, but building out the procurement function for the first time, advice that that you would repeat, or maybe things that you would have done differently for them to take away from your learnings.
For sure. Yeah. So, when I first started hearing the laws and understanding all of that, and then of course, the orange jumpsuit, it really kind of puts you in a position where you want to be very strict with everything that you do, and you kind of lose a little bit of the customer service side of things. And so that is something that I look back and think, okay, that is something I would have done differently from the start, and something that we've really strived to change since we've been able to build this department, to focus more on the customer service side of things while remaining compliant with laws and rules and guidelines, but also focusing on who your customers are, who your internal customers are, and your ultimate end user.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's key with those in mind. And do you have any advice on stakeholder navigation? Because sometimes your end user and your internal stakeholders, they can be at odds. And so you have to be sort of facilitating an ideal outcome. Like, how have you approached, I'll be overarching, but, stakeholder navigation as a whole?
Yeah, and that's a tricky one because, like you said, you've got to follow certain rules and laws, but at the same time, we have to include everybody in the decision-making process that it's going to affect in some shape, way, or form. We go out to bid for custom apparel, and so, we need to include our high school campuses, our junior high campuses, and our elementary campuses, make sure that there's stakeholders from each level that are involved, so that we're not the ones saying, okay, we're making this decision, this is who you're going to use, and this is how it's going to be. It's more of, okay, let's go through this together. I will guide you through the process. And then ultimately, I'm here to make sure everybody in the district has what they need, but by doing it legally and following all the right processes. So it's really a delicate balance of, we want to do it the right way, but we have to meet the needs of everybody in the district and ensure that they have what they need at any given time. Right,
exactly. Yeah, no, that's great. There was a prioritization of facilitation in your approach, I guess. Hey, that seemed to more unify everyone is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Yeah. We'll pivot a little bit to some pretty meat and potato questions for you, just so if people don't have their pens and paper out, they can now. One thing I wanted to highlight and ask you is, like, what's a resource or a tool or a channel that you've seen, that people aren't using correctly or to its fullest?
Well, and that's tricky because, you look at anyone, and I'm specifically thinking from the education standpoint, just because that's my world and that's what I know. But any given district, something that I do here in Magnolia might not work for somebody else in another district.
Right.
And so even if it's a specific resource or tool, it just may not work for them, and what they do won't work for us. And so it doesn't mean that, we're doing it wrong or not using it to its fullest, or they are, it's just kind of what's best for us. But one thing that I would say that we really do well here. And this just kind of leads back to the stakeholder navigation is feedback. We thrive off of feedback. We're a new department. And so we can build what we know, but there's no way for us to really know if we're meeting the needs of our stakeholders, if our processes are easy to utilize for not just people within the district, but with our vendors, and just ensuring that we have a survey for just about everything. So, we finish a procurement process, we go out to bid, and we're sending out surveys to the people who were in the committee to help make the decision to see, what they like about that process. We're, sending out a survey to the vendors about, how was the process working with the district here? Of course, we've had nothing but great feedback ever since we started using Bonfire. So that's always a plus. But we send out surveys to our stakeholders after we've been using the vendor for a year or so, and say, okay, how's this vendor doing? How are we doing as a department? And what can we do better for you? That way we can really make sure we're building our department to be something that's helpful and a positive addition to the district, as opposed to restrictive addition.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic proactive approach. And then from the feedback that you receive via the surveys, and it's fine if this is evolving, do you and your team look at those on like a certain cadence, or as they come in? How do you approach the retrospective there?
Definitely. Yeah. So we hold weekly meetings. I have a buyer and a purchasing specialist in our purchasing side of things. And then earlier this year, we just opened up a warehouse and distribution center. So I have my warehouse supervisor that I meet with on a weekly basis. And we pull up those surveys. Of course, if there's no new feedback on the surveys, then of course we're not looking at anything if nobody answered anything. But, we look at those and we read through it and we see, okay, these are the answers we're receiving. What can we do better? What are we doing really well? And, what's something that we might need to change to better accommodate our campuses, our departments, and, because ultimately everything we do, and this is something I absolutely love about my job, is we ultimately affect the education of the children in our district. And so even though, I'm sitting here in an office and running bids and things like that, it still affects what happens in the classroom. And so we just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to positively affect the students' education through what we do.
Yeah, very true. And I didn't realize too until today as well, like your personal connection with that, with your wife being a teacher, right? You see that outcome.
Yes. Yeah. And she's what really got me thinking, okay, if I go into a school district, I can make a positive outcome through my work. I always thought I'd have to work for a hospital or something like that to be able to really make some sort of difference. But to be a part of the process that molds the minds who become doctors and police officers and teachers someday, it's rewarding for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of what you've spoken to today, you may have highlighted your answer that I will ask, or your answer that you'll answer, I should say, to this question coming up. You are obviously humble, so you're probably not going to love the phrasing of this. But what is something that you've seen most or everyone is trying to do that you feel as though like yourselves, your team have discovered a better way to do?
That is a tough question to answer, especially with us being a new department. We're still trying to figure out all of our processes. We're still trying to work out the kinks in our processes. And so, I would say, again, going back to feedback and understanding our stakeholders, that's really what we're able to focus on and do better. We are always trying to find new processes, new ways to do something, to better utilize technology. Utilizing Bonfire has been an amazing help with that, with all the different modules and being able to complete, vendor performance surveys. I don't think there's a lot of districts who are able to have a system where they maintain their vendors and maintain their performance within the same system. So I think that's something that we're able to utilize. That's not something every district does. So it's definitely something we pride ourselves in.
No, that's great. And it does seem as though you have a phenomenal team now of 7. What is something that you or your team have recently achieved that you're proud of?
Well, so we officially became a department back in February of 2020. And In fall of 2020, we were one of less than 50 districts in the state of Texas to be awarded with the Purchasing Award of Merit through the Texas Association of School Business Officials. And that was just beyond amazing to see that we were able to pull together and be able to be awarded with that only several months into being an official department. And some departments that have been around for years weren't awarded with that. So that is something I'm extremely proud of our team for doing. And that was a big deal for us.
Yeah, not to mention the team was in the formative time, but it was a year of chaos. Yes. So that's fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah. It was definitely not the best year for us to attempt it, but we did it. And, navigating everything with COVID and being able to obtain that award, definitely very proud of my team for being able to achieve that.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And so, Adam, before we close, as you know, every week we ask our guests, what is the number one piece of advice you'd give to people starting their career in public procurement?
Definitely. Well, as I mentioned before, learning all those laws, you have to know your stuff. But my piece of advice would not to let go of the customer service side of things, to make sure that you understand why you are where you are and why it is important that you're doing what you're doing. Again, with me, working in education, ultimately affecting the students. It doesn't matter what job you're in. Ultimately, you have a final end user that you're affecting. And so don't get bogged down in the legal stuff, in the laws and everything, or the processes even. Really focus on making sure that you're meeting the needs of all of your stakeholders.
No, that's fantastic. And then if you are comfortable, if people wanted to get a hold of you or reach out to you with questions, like what's the best way to reach you?
Through my email with the district at astearns@magnoliaisd.org.
Perfect. And people will see it in the writing. There's an A that found itself in his last name. So.
Yes.
But it'll be in the title. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you again, Adam, for joining today, for sharing all of this advice. It was a great conversation, and I can't wait to have this launch, and then everyone can sort of learn from you going forward on how to facilitate a procurement process, not only, but also that customer service element is huge. So thank you again for today's conversation.
Thank you, Rachel. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone.
Procurement professionals like you are the lifeblood of public sector organizations, dedicated not only to supporting your agency, but the constituents you serve. That's why we've created the Inside Public Procurement podcast here at Bonfire, a unique place where you can share stories and discuss the topics that matter to public procurement pros. From digitization and the future of public procurement to ensuring a fair and transparent process, we're all about finding new strategies to help your agency succeed. Join us at gobonfire.com to learn more. You've been listening to Inside Public Procurement by Bonfire. If you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you have an idea for an episode or want to come on as a guest, email us at hello@gobonfire.com. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.